So this is the last session of the day, so I'm going to try and make it as interactive as possible. So do look worried, because I will be asking you some questions to wake you up. Okay? Right. So my name's Euan Davis. I don't know, how many of you saw my presentation in the main stage? One person, two people. Okay. So for those of you who didn't see it, what my presentation dealt with is the future of work. So I'm going to go around and ask each one of you to say one word, what you think sums up the future of work.
Digital.
That's quite easy. I think that's going to happen. So one word that sums up the future of work.
Flexibility.
Good one. You, sir?
Cooperation.
Cooperation. And I'll ask our organizers.
Home office.
Nice. Home office. And what about you, sir? What do you think the future of work? One word. He was looking at his phone. He wasn't really thinking about the future of work. One word? Okay, I'll say it for you. Platforms. So, my name's Euan Davis. Like I say, I work for Cognizant. Hands up if you've heard of Cognizant. One person, two people. Okay, we're pretty good. We grow at a scary rate. $12 billion US of revenues, and we're growing around about 15% per year. It is an incredible growth story, but no one's heard of us. So my job is to try and build the brand in your mind. So one of the reasons and the way we do that is to think about the future of work. So I actually run a think tank called the Center for the Future of Work, and that think tank has to provide each and every one of you ideas, concepts, narratives that you can take back to your businesses and think about and do things differently. Because if I turned up as a supplier and just told you what everyone else tells you, then you won't think too much of me. You think I'm just like everyone else. But if I turn around and give you a really, really different or innovative point of view about the future of work, it might be flexible, it might be automated, it might be at home, it might be millennial, all those things, then you might have a listen and think, oh, hang on, maybe Cognizant has something rather interesting to say about my business and what it means for the future. So, more and more companies are competing on code. I talked about this in the presentation this morning. How many of you have a LinkedIn profile? Yeah, pretty much everyone. Now, what do you think your LinkedIn profile tells your employer about you, about what you like, about what you want to work like, whether you want to be at home, whether you want to be more flexible, whether you want to participate on a particular project? We all have these codes around us, these digital trails that say an awful lot about us as people and what we want to do. So LinkedIn, BMW, GE, BBVA, Deutsche Bank, Deutsche Bahn, British Airways, they've all figured out that the secret to digital is competing on code, actually collecting data wherever they can, where it's legal and where it's not. So what was really interesting hearing about Uber yesterday and hearing about Daimler, value more and more is in the virtual. It's not so much about physical things anymore, it's about virtual things. And that's what I would argue Uber does so well. Look at its valuation. You know, Kai touched on it last night. They've built a platform, and that platform is delivering value. And the markets are seeing the value, but more importantly, more older legacy companies are recognizing that's the secret to digital. So it's all about the platform. These platforms are emerging everywhere. They're emerging around the products you buy. They're emerging around your company, your customers, your employees, your LinkedIn profile, your suppliers. But any noun, any place, anything now has a virtual self as well as a physical self. So the car you drive is actually a platform. The home you live in, if it's a smart home, is a platform. The city we live in could be a smart city. It's a platform for innovation. So if you're going to build the digital workforce of the future, then it's all about platforms, it's all about algorithms, and it's all about machines. And they're changing business models, revenue flows, cost structures, just ask any bank, any shop, or any car maker like Daimler. They can see the way the future is starting to look. So more and more leaders, and I'll say leaders, are challenged to build a digital workforce. They really need to think about the sorts of people they need and how those people work together, and maybe what sorts of rewards they need in the future. And of course, what Cognizant would like to promote, and I have to put my hand up and say I'm here to promote Cognizant, what Cognizant would like to promote is there is a new architecture emerging for work, one that takes heed of machines, platforms, and more importantly, people. So, you might recognize this slide. This is a smart car. There's a titanic or huge battle going on for the interface into the car. If you control the interface, you control the partnership. If you control the partnership, then you can begin exchanging data, API traffic, all sorts of really interesting new offerings and services and connections that allow the platform to provide a base for business going forward. So the question then becomes, where's your platform? Is your company building a platform? Is there a process? Is there a company-wide process you would like to build a platform around? Is there a product you'd like to build a platform around, like a turbine, a car, or a home? So I'm going to give you some examples of what these look like. We all know the smart home is beginning to emerge, and smart homes are now offering a platform for utility companies to begin partnering with startups. You heard about some of them here the last couple of days. You're seeing our own health becoming a platform. A lot of the mobile Samsung, for example, is starting to develop a lot of smart technologies around how we actually measure our own health. And I guarantee in about 10 years, they'll look at us and say, did you really not think about doing healthcare in this way, where you could track your own data and understand your own health, your own Internet of Self? And of course, where's your platform? So just to give it in a nutshell, platforms are software layers. That's it, very simple. They're layers of software, and they collect data about you, your customers, your employees, your suppliers. They're really changing what talent is, because I actually think talent is starting to pivot around the platform. The platform is becoming central to how you see and think about talent. All those startups you heard about on the last 2 days, they're actually revolving around a platform. They're looking for customers, legacy companies, who actually have the customers, so they don't have to spend the money acquiring those customers. Look at APIs and the growth of APIs. That is one scary graph, but it shows you what the power of the platform can do. API traffic has gone through the roof in the last 5 years. I can't even tell you what the numbers are on that. It's just shot up. But API traffic isn't being monitored. No one's really doing it well. No one really understands what it means. No one has the capabilities to really analyze who's calling for services from their platform. Right, so where is your platform? Silicon Berlin. Sounds like a bit of a gear change, but bear with me and I'll tell you why I've put this particular slide up. If you think about this conference, what we've seen over the last 2 days, the level of entrepreneurial activity is fantastic. So I think NOAA have done a great job of bringing together the greatest innovation wave we've seen. And this is only going to get bigger and stronger over time. So if you look outside Berlin and look to other cities around Europe, into London, Liverpool, Lyon in France, Paris, Madrid, Valladolid, Finland, you're starting to see these clusters of talent everywhere. And I would argue that if you're going to drive innovation in this age, then you need to plug your company in to a talent cluster. And the research I've done shows that more companies are beginning to rethink their organizational model because it's just not fit for purpose. So if you're a good business student, you'll know about Michael Porter. Hands up if you know about Michael Porter. I do hope someone does. Okay, great. One person, two, okay. Everyone knows who Michael Porter is? No? Okay, so Michael Porter basically developed corporate strategy last century. Michael Porter's model for corporate strategy is breaking down. It's not really working the way it's meant to work. The amount of data that's beginning to flow around businesses, around processes, around customers, around people. Do you remember I talked about, code everywhere? That means there's so much heat in Michael Porter's model, it's beginning to melt. And something rather different is taking its place. So, sorry? Yeah, sure. As I go through the presentation, I'll talk about what that actually means. So Michael Porter's model had very siloed approaches to thinking about corporate functions and so on. Now, when you get heat, data beginning to fly around all those corporate functions, and collaboration and exchange between corporate functions, Michael Porter's model of very neat silos just doesn't work. So you need to think about something else, a new construct for the company of the future. And this is what we've done in the paper from Cognizant. We tried to lay out what the blueprint of the organization actually looks like for the digital age. So Michael Porter's model of organizational behavior, Euan, I remember doing it myself, dead boring, but suffice to say, it doesn't really drive agility. And companies really need to think about agility for the future. So if you saw WeWorks, guess how many offices WeWorks added in the last 4 years? 6,000. They've added 6,000 co-working spaces around the world in the last 3 years. That shows you something weird is going on in how we work. So the lady at the back, the conference organizer that talked about working at home, she's spot on. Because WeWorks have figured that out. They know more and more young people don't want to travel into a corporate, dusty office and sit in a cube. They want to go where the hipsters are. They want to go where the coffee bars are. They want to go where there's free beer. They want to go to a WeWorks facility. So these talent clusters are emerging everywhere. There's 2 in Amsterdam. There's probably 3 here in Berlin. There's about 5 in London. And they're just really, I think, legacy companies need to think about how they go to where the talent is. So this is not just a European story, but you look around the world, you're seeing this wave of entrepreneurialism wash over everything. So in the big cities, in Beijing to London to New York, you're seeing catapults, startup activities, startup lounges, networking events. This is how talent is increasingly working. And as a legacy company, you need to think about how you actually access it or key into it or bring some of those hot digital tools and technologies into your company. So the other major force is robots. Who's worried about robots? No? All quite relaxed? Okay. I'm going to ask this lady here. One word. What do you think of robots?
Smart.
So smart. I'm going to come over here and ask you. One word to describe robots?
For me, it's a cleaning machine.
Cleaning machine. Yeah, I'd like one of those in our house. So we all have different views of what a robot actually is. My view, robots are basically smart software. They're software tools that run processes, and they actually get rid of a lot of the dull process work. I started my career as an accountant. I spent the first 6 months keying figures into a spreadsheet. That's not work. That was just slavery. I got paid for it, but it's not really how I thought my career was going to pan out when I was 22. Robots, think about software tools, think about machines, think about algorithms. You're going to see new workflows begin to emerge around the business. That's going to bring the best of software and the best of people. Great example is healthcare. Look at how healthcare is beginning to change around personal data and the apps we use to track our own health. Now, you're going to see more and more hospitals and healthcare systems begin to lean into those capabilities to deliver better outcomes. So Frau Merkel, she has a great stat about Europe, which I love. She says Europe has 5% of the global population, 25% of GDP, and 50% of its social security spending. That ain't going to work in the next 20 years. That's going to break. So these technologies and tools that you find in healthcare, these ways of doing healthcare, are going to emerge to solve some of the issues we actually have in our everyday lives. So, if you look at robots and machines and what it means, well, there's actually if you go on the BBC, God bless the BBC, go on the BBC, there's actually a test that will tell you whether a robot will take your job. And it's quite an interesting one, because we did our work, and about 35% of the people were looking a little bit worried after we did the test. But you'll start to see these new workflows emerge between people and the machines. Software tools are going to arrive into process work, but you're going to see new workflows emerge between people and machines, so you start driving intelligence into process work. Systems automation will happen, but it's going to be used to sense, predict, and interpret data and drive new offerings, new efficiencies, and yes, new ways of doing things. So that's people to machines. We actually try to provide a blueprint of what all these pieces mean. So when you look at the rise of platforms, you actually connect platforms to talent clusters, you actually think about basically building new workflows around the business, new data flows, new ways of supporting people as they do their job. And we actually landed on this, this rather nice heading. We said, look, it's going to be about people. It's not about machines, it's about people. People are really going to drive or power digital innovation. And that means what's going to happen is you're going to see some really, really big reorganizations begin to happen. And the way I like to put it is to sort of look at the Reichstag and say, okay, well, this is what the talent model of the future is going to look like. You're not going to just throw out what's worked for decades. What you're actually going to do is rejuvenate it and think about adding something beautiful and modern to the business. In much of the same way as Norman Foster built this beautiful dome over the Reichstag and brought an 18th century building, or sorry, 19th century building back to life with beauty and charm, I suspect you'll see more organizations begin to build their own versions of the future organizational model with new techniques, new ways of working, new reward mechanisms, new structures. So as an example of that, the research I did, what I found was companies are beginning to fragment. They're beginning to shrink the corporate core, and they're beginning to open up satellite offices in some of those talent clusters. So I suspect Uber and Daimler will be in Detroit trying to understand what the future of battery power means to the automated car. As a logistics company, so think about it. Do you know how we work? Think about this, just this one point. More people are employed driving vans, buses, lorries than any other industry. Now, if automation comes into that, what will those people do? So this, for me, is an existential question to think about what the future looks like and what we will do for work. So, the digital age needs a new master work architecture. And this is what we've been working on in the last 6 months to try and figure out what that master work architecture does. What do you need to build? What sort of structures does it need to support? How does the technology look? How do the process flows work? So that's work we're doing at Cognizant to begin thinking about the master work architecture of the future. And what we've come up with is this. Well, not this, but this is the slide. That's Porter's model, and you can see it's starting to break down. Do you see how the data is beginning to flood? It's becoming porous. So when I say about the Porter model breaking down, that's exactly what I mean. But I would argue that leaders need to be humble, and I was really pleased to hear that yesterday in the presentations, because I think CEOs do need to be a little bit humble. Rather than thinking about the golden retirement, thinking about really building the organization for the future. And I think a lot of them actually are. A lot of them, listening to Dieter last night talk about Daimler, it was fascinating to hear him say this is going to be about partnerships. We know this world is coming. This is about how we openly exchange data and information and think about revenue shares in our business. Command and control structures, long decision cycles, silo-based mentalities, that's gone. That's dead. That has to be dead. And I would argue legacy companies are doing that right now. They're starting to really tear down those silos and do something a little bit different. More and more companies are starting to build flatter, shared, collaborative approaches to organizational design right at the edge of their business. They're not junking their old organizational model. They're building the beautiful cupola like you have on the Reichstag to really make it fit for purpose for the 21st century. So a new work platform needs building. It will orchestrate. It will understand exactly what people do and what machines do. It will give knowledge work meaning. It will allow people to focus on the tasks that really drive human value and healthcare, about caring for people, not about inputting onto a spreadsheet. It will mine work and determine the business's algorithm. Now that's quite an interesting, innovative thought. Think about what LinkedIn says about your business. If you could collectively look at LinkedIn for where you work, what would it say about your particular company? So this is how that architecture looks. These three core principles are going to drive your business forward. It's about the people, it's about platforms, and it's about processes. Those are really going to be what a digital business is about. You then need to think about what work needs to do, how you lead the organization, policies, processes for working at home, for example, how you use data and analytics through your organization and into your markets. Think about where you need to be. Where is the talent cluster for your industry? Medical devices apparently are all looking towards Pennsylvania. Security is looking more towards Israel. You're starting to see these really, really strange, rather comforting dynamics emerge in the world of talent. Sourcing and reskilling. You know, skills are starting to change so quickly on what's required in order to succeed. And of course, power. Command and control won't work. Organizations need to be flatter in how they work. So when you get those pieces in place, then you can really transform the organization. So that's my final slide. I'm a little bit out of time, but I just wanted to give you a flavor of how Cognizant is looking at the world and how we're trying to help our clients navigate this shift, because it really is a once in a lifetime, no, once in 100 years shift. Everyone's right, it is changing. Our organizations feel like they're built for a different age. And if you want to understand what steer you need to give your kids, then please do read the report, because I think it provides a really, really nice blueprint, really, of what the future of work is going to look like. So, with that, I suspect I've stunned you into silence, but if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to take them now. I asked you questions, you can ask me questions. Yes, sir.
As I work for Bosch, I'll be open. We've got great leadership with a very good vision. We've got great groundwork happening. How do we get middle management to adopt this?
Tough gig. Well, I would argue, okay, so here's my point. I think digital doesn't belong to any one age. So everyone sort of says millennials, yada, yada, yada. I don't think it's about the millennials. I think it's about the mindset you bring to work. So I would hope the middle management are given opportunities to really showcase the best of Bosch, or to showcase the best of what they're capable of. So one of the clients we've worked with in the Nordics is a bit like Bosch. You probably guess who it is. But what they've done is provide their middle management an open platform to innovate. They've actually given them the mandate to say, you know what, you can have one day or kind of half a day a week to focus on a digital project that will really benefit the company. And that's really galvanized, as I understand it, the way the management looks at digital. There's some people that just won't, use a smartphone. Try doing, I won't. There's some people that just won't use a smartphone. I suspect that is not going to run for too much longer. That kind of attitude, I think, really has to change. But middle management, I think, are key to this, actually. I think this vision, leaders will say, this is what we want to do, but it's the middle management that are going to carry this through and say, this is how our culture needs to change. So I would recommend that Bosch focuses very strongly on that middle management and bring them together on this journey. And if you want me to come in and do a presentation, more than happy to. That's what my job is about. So thank you.
I think my question is also going in the same direction. You have been talking about the journey, but how does that journey typically look like for an organization, to get to this point?
This is all very new, so I have to put a bit of a flag up here. So the Center for the Future of Work, if it doesn't make people feel a bit uncomfortable with its points of view, it's failed. So I do this work as a way of signposting to say, look, you need to be thinking about this. It might not be happening in 2 years, 3 years, but in 5 years, you have to have an answer for what this looks like. So to get to the question, which I've forgotten. What was the question? Sorry, it's been a long day. What was the question?
No, how is the typical journey to get to this look like? Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So the journey is all about the people. So I make the point right at the start of the presentation, it's people, not just machines. You need to think about catalysts that you can put into the organization that can begin starting this journey. And those catalysts will only work if they have the mandate from the board or from the top of the organization to say this is exactly what we're going to do. What my company has done is develop that catalyst function to really work its way through the business. So when we actually do these kind of searches or these kind of research, is to challenge ourselves as well as our clients and prospects. So if we don't challenge ourselves to think a little bit differently about the future, then the clients won't come to us. So you need to have these catalysts within the organization that can take this point of view through. And I have to say, you usually look around, you can see them in each business unit, the young guns who are a little bit younger, a little bit more savvy about what digital means, and actually have a little bit of clout in terms of the work they're doing. So I'd recommend landing on those catalysts and giving them a mandate to think about, building the Reichstag dome, if you will, around the organization. I hope that helps. Any other questions? Yes.
I've got a question about my startup. So we're from Pakistan, so a very conservative work environment, very classical British colony, so like hierarchical. When we started a startup 2 years ago, we kind of followed the classical model, coming from an enterprise background myself. Now we're breaking it down, and we're feeling the pinch because people like one of my guys, we call it love letters. So we're trying to produce these flatter structures and become agile, DevOps and everything into a technology. So we now tend to get these love letters from people. So we made our marketing much flatter, right? No structure, everybody. And suddenly 2 people are almost leaving out the door. So how would you instill this new culture? Although we are a startup, but because of the cultural issues, maybe the psyche of the workforce. And the second part of the question is attracting talent into that kind of a structure, right? So I interview people, at least 2 to 3 people every week. And one of the first questions I get, what will be my designation? Would I be a marketing manager? Would I be a head of technology? Is how do you break down those barriers of new talent and existing talent?
That's a good question. I get asked that question a lot. So the first part is not to go too fast on new culture. culture takes time to bed in. And one of the recommendations we make is to go a little bit slow on this. If you go too fast, you'll break the culture. People walk out the door, and you're screwed. So I think you have to sort of take the cultural change slower than you wish. I know you go fast, but you need to take a little bit slower, and you need to get key people involved. Take them out for lunch, have a beer regularly, and make sure they understand exactly what the vision is. Now, in terms of attracting talent into the business, I suspect you might have an issue with your recruitment and your message. So a great example, which we write about in the report, is GE. What GE did, they knew they're quite a boring company. They said, we're a boring company. We have problem attracting. I hope no one works at GE here, do they? Because I think they're a fascinating company, honestly. But they are. What they're doing around the industrial internet is really cool. So what GE decided to do, they recognized they needed to make their work, they need to build a brand around the work that a potential recruit into the business would do. So they decided they would make engineering really sexy. They started to develop an advertising campaign, writing the adverts differently, the copywriting, the vision of what a career path in GE could do. They had a digital career path as opposed to an analog career path. They had all these tricks about how to actually persuade the next generation to want to come to work for GE, as opposed to going to work for some blockchain startup or some, kind of turbine virtualization specialist. So they had these ideas that they needed to change. Now that campaign around recruitment was so successful, it actually appeared on TV, and the corporate department decided they would take it and use it to build the brand of GE. So there's things you can do in how you position what a digital career path will look like at your startup. Rather than you won't be a manager in 2 years, what you'll get is a full understanding of how the startup system works in Asia Minor, for example. You can begin putting those messages into the job spec, and then you begin attracting the right people. But I would recommend spend a day, go around the universities, present your vision, and I suspect you'll get CVs flying in. I really do. So, okay, yeah. It's just a question of changing the message in terms of what we want to do. So, good luck. Okay? All done. Well, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.